Hi everyone, welcome to Scicomm Monday. Thank you to everybody out there who was patient. We had the internet actually was down and we were trying to patch everything through different means, basically patching it through phone lines to hopefully get everything through. But for everyone out there, I'm your host, Nicole Wood. Thank you for sticking around with us. Now I'll actually be able to see everyone's tweets and messages and everything, so feel free to chat away during the broadcast today, and we'll get to all of your questions as best we can. And a big thank you to our host. Wow, see, this is what happens when you lose internet. You forget how to talk. To our guest today, Sarah Orlando, for dealing with all the fun technical issues that were happening. So with that, I'd like to introduce Sarah Orlando. She is from the Ohio Sea Grant and has been extremely patient today, doing 2 broadcasts today, basically, as we tried to do the one through the phone. So Sarah, thank you for being on Scicomm Monday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Oh. Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us.
Yeah, and I can already see on the stream here, we're already getting a lot better turnout with everyone. It helps when you actually can have people stay for more than 5 seconds on the live stream when it's not kicking them off because the stream isn't strong enough to have everyone on there. So I know we kind of went through some of this earlier, but if you would humor everyone who actually can hear us now, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background so everyone knows what it is you do and where you're from.
Sure. Yeah. This will be the Cliff Notes version.
Right.
So yeah, I am from Cleveland, Ohio, originally. I grew up in this area, went boating and fishing with my dad, my grandparents, my parents growing up, and basically told my mom in 8th grade that I wanted to be a marine biologist. And as Nicole and I were saying, it's kind of one of those things that is very common, but I think my mom realized by the time I went to high school, it's something that I didn't drop. As I got older, I kept with it, so she was like, oh, this is really happening. But I went through high school, kept interest in marine biology, ended up attending Wittenberg University and working through their marine science program. Was able to actually spend a semester at the Duke Marine Lab in North Carolina to help develop my marine science background and education there. Learned about policy there, which was really awesome because up until that point I had been strictly focused on science. So kind of started to explore other areas of science and what else you can do with a science degree while I was there. And what really changed my career path for me was when as a junior, I had a research experience for undergraduates at Stone Laboratory, which is an island owned by Ohio State, operated as a field station in the middle of Lake Erie. And I spent a whole summer just learning about Lake Erie, and I had grown up around Lake Erie, but not really had been exposed much education-wise. So I fell in love with Lake Erie and kind of switched from a saltwater to a freshwater type of career path from that point. So I did go to grad school. I went to grad school at Texas A&M in Galveston. I actually worked with Texas Sea Grant there. That's where I learned about Sea Grant for the first time, and was lucky enough to come back home to Ohio and get a job with Ohio Sea Grant. So that's kind of the path I had. Originally marine biology, but now I say I just do marine biology without the salt. So.
Yeah, that's pretty appropriate. So for those folks out there who don't know what the Sea Grant program is, can you describe that a little bit so everyone can kind of get up to speed with that? Because probably a lot of folks are thinking, you're in Ohio, what's up with the Sea Grant?
Yep, and we do have inland seas, or we used to have inland seas, but yeah, so Ohio Sea Grant is one of many Sea Grant college programs. There's actually over 33 of them across the country, and the ones that a lot of people know about are the coastal programs, the ocean programs. That's kind of where it started, but we do have Sea Grant programs in the Great Lakes. What our role is we do research, education, and outreach about Great Lakes issues. So for Ohio Sea Grant, we work on Lake Erie. And Our role is to kind of, we are a partnership between government, academia, and private stakeholders. So we try and balance and work with multiple groups. We absolutely work on environmental issues that surround and focus on Lake Erie, but we try and do that within the context of a strong and healthy economy. So Lake Erie is actually provides a lot of revenue for the state of Ohio, and so we want to strengthen Lake Erie's economy and the coastal communities that surround Lake Erie, but we want to do it in a responsible way.
Right. Yeah, I think that's. Do you find that by really helping to not only boost the natural environment but also the economy as well, that you're more likely to have people really tune in to what it is that you want to do when it comes to doing scientific, initiatives to help better the lake?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you put it in the context of we want a sustainable, whatever it is, business, a sustainable environment, a sustainable park, or what have you, but it's sustainable from the standpoint of both environmentally sustainable and economically sustainable. I think that helps bring more people to the table, and kind of, I find that it helps reduce any conflicts because you're not fighting against one or other objective. You're trying to find a solution for everybody. So yeah, and our whole role, what we do is we provide science-based factual information. So our role is not to influence or advocate for anything. It's simply to say, hey, here's the scientific information that helps you make an informed decision and help facilitate communications in communities with different groups of people so that they come to find a solution for Lake Erie's issues.
Great. Yeah, 'cause I think sometimes people think you either have to have the economy or you have to have the environment, but you can have both. You just have
Yeah,
to be knowledgeable enough to know how to make that happen.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, absolutely.
So, what are some of the issues facing the Great Lakes today? You hear about invasive species, pollution. So, what are some of the issues that you guys are seeing down in Lake Erie?
Yeah, yeah. So I laugh because we actually have a Lake Erie issues talk
Oh,
that we actually like a package talk that we give. So probably the most common one that you hear about when you hear about Ohio and Lake Erie is harmful algal blooms. That's one that's been raised on the national scale just because of what happened with Toledo and their drinking water a couple years ago. But there are other issues that lead to harmful algal blooms. So those include nutrient loading, so just runoff from rain events. Primarily when we talk about nutrients in Ohio, we're concerned about phosphorus and nitrogen. Those are the main ones. We're also concerned about sediment and dredging and basically not only sediment runoff that also happens when we have high rain events, but what we do with that sediment, how we manage, and in Ohio really we're looking at how we can sustainably manage dredge material and find beneficial uses for that material. Climate change is one that we are talking about, and in that context we're simply talking about changes in extreme weather events. So for example, with our water levels in the Great Lakes, we're looking at higher highs and lower lows, and how as communities we can help those communities prepare for those types of events. So just local, climate change impacts. We're also looking at aquatic invasive species. That is definitely a high topic that we're focusing on. And yeah, those are the main ones. And sustainable development. So basically, creating a community that again is sustainably, economically, and environmentally.
right. Yeah, I've got up here on the screen for everyone to see an image of I know it's clean, drain, dry up here in Michigan, I
Yeah.
believe. I don't know if that's exactly what it is for you guys down there as well. It seems like everyone has a very slight variation of that whole process. So can you tell us a little bit about that program and how it helps to prevent invasive species spread?
Absolutely. So the clean, drain, dry motto that you mentioned is part of what's called, it's a national campaign called Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers. And the mission of that campaign, Sea Grant, Ohio Sea Grant, many other Sea Grant programs are a partner on that campaign. And the mission of that is to help educate really recreational anglers and other recreational water users about how they can play a big role in preventing the spread of aquatic invasive species. So the clean, drain, dry motto is kind of we feel that it's a pretty shortened, quick and easy, memorable term. Basically, what that means is if you are in any body of water, and whether you're an angler, whether you're a duck hunter, a scuba diver, a paddler, anybody that's a recreational water user, and you are going to be going to another body of water, a huge way you can help prevent the spread of invasive species is cleaning off your boats, your duck decoys, your scuba diving equipment, draining all water from any boots, bait buckets, anything like that, and letting it dry for probably at least 5 days. There are specific recommendations based on where you're at in the country, but you want to let it dry out completely before you go to a new body of water. And believe it or not, that plays a big, big help in reducing the spread of invasive species.
Yeah, I know you had talked about earlier when we were leading up to today's broadcast about the fact that you have the unique issue of not only you're dealing with the Great Lakes watershed, but you also have the Ohio River watershed and some of the issues that you could possibly have with transporting invasive species from one body of water to another. So has there been a lot of back and forth of invasive species spread through the state of Ohio through those two different water bodies?
Yeah, luckily in Ohio, we have not had a significant number of invasives that have been spread through that method, through kind of people going back and forth, basically from southern Ohio, the Ohio River watershed, into northern Ohio. But it is something that we are very cognizant of and trying to work on because, for example, Asian carps, there's several species of them, but we're definitely concerned about them in the Great Lakes. Silver and bighead carp are two species that are not yet, there's not a reproducing population in the Great Lakes. There have been instances of numerous bighead and silver carp down in the Ohio River near the Cincinnati area. I believe silver carp for sure. So what we're trying to do through our outreach is try and make sure we're educating people who may be, say, from southern Ohio coming up to Lake Erie to go fishing or boating or what have you, and making sure we're minimizing any chance of having any of those species of Asian carps introduced.
Yeah, because I know that's definitely a big fear for a lot of the researchers and agency members that I know up here in Michigan is having Asian carp get into the Great Lakes. There's already instances of grass carp in, I believe it's Lake Ontario, and then possibly also Lake Erie as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the grass carp are one. They're a concern. They're not nearly as high a priority as the silver and the bighead. The grass carp have been stocked in Ohio for years, and so what we're finding is the issue is they're supposed to be stocked sterilely. So they're great pond management fish, but they must by law be stocked so that they are sterile. So that's what we're trying to do, is trying to make sure that there's no grass carp that are fertile that are out in the waterways, and using that information to say, okay, well, if grass carp are surviving here that we're finding in the wild, that could be a sign that potentially silver carp and bighead carp could do well there as well. So scientists are keeping an eye on that so that they can understand the potential for how bighead and silver carp would behave in Ohio. And so trying to encourage, okay, well, then we really need to make sure these guys stay out if we feel that they would do well in Ohio's waters.
So part of your job is working with the Clean Marinas program. So can you please explain that a little bit to us and exactly what all goes into that to be a clean marina?
Absolutely, yeah. So I would say, my main role in being with Ohio Sea Grant is I'm the program manager for the Ohio Clean Marinas and Clean Boater programs. Basically, that is a sub-program that we work on as a partnership program with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and the Lake Erie Marine Trades Association. So again, it's an example of university, agency, industry partnership. And our role is to help marina owners, again, educate them on what's going on with your air and water quality and the environment in Ohio, and to educate them on how they can actually play a big role in helping to protect and preserve that air and water quality, and then make a healthy air and water quality. So the Clean Marinas program is the way we do that. We actually certify marinas for being environmentally friendly. We have a checklist of what we call BMPs, or best management practices. And so all of our marinas have to meet any items that apply to them on that checklist. And we go through that with them. It's a completely voluntary program, so the whole point of it is recognizing the marinas that are going above and beyond what's required of them by law, and helping to promote those marinas. And we also do education to boaters, so that not only we can encourage boaters to frequent clean marinas, but have that trickle-down effect where it's not only the marinas that are taking action, for example, reducing their pollution to waterways, taking steps to educate their boaters on invasive species, but it's the boaters that are also actively involved in protecting the waterways. And we're not alone. There's clean marina programs all across the country. So that's the other cool part, is we say if you're a boater, you should be able to find a clean marina just about any state, any coastal state in the United States. So.
Do you have a good turnout with that program? Are there a lot of marinas owners that are really excited and more willing to do that? Like once you show them, like, hey, it's just a couple easy steps that you can do to help, get yourself to be a clean marina?
Yeah, I'd say our biggest challenge is people are just their misunderstanding about how much is involved in being a clean marina. In Ohio, we really, part of our role is outreach. So we walk through with the marina owners through the process. And a lot of times marinas are, what's awesome is they're already doing most of the things right. It's just helping to educate them on tweaking a few things. Something as simple as putting lids on your trash cans or moving your trash cans inside actually make a big difference. So it's just helping to give them that little extra nudge. And I would say most marinas are eligible to be a clean marina. It's just, going through the steps. So we're in Ohio, we have over 400 marinas now that we've started to really get a handle on how many we have statewide. And that is anything from the big marinas down to little tiny mom and pops, and we include everybody. We include yacht clubs, boat clubs. If you're willing to try, we're willing to work with you. And we have currently 71 that are certified clean marinas. So we have a long way to go, but we're always looking for new people interested in the program. And even outside of our certified marinas, we're happy to help educate marinas, on best management practices for improving water quality.
Great. Yeah, like I think it was a video that you had sent me a while ago showing how it's something as simple as maybe just building like a vegetation layer between the parking lot and the water that can help, keep pollution from getting into the lakes there. And
Yeah.
it's so simple and easy to do, and it seems like it's fairly low cost, a lot of the procedures and things that you're trying to advocate for marinas owners.
Yeah, and what I love so much about it is a lot of our practices that we educate our marine owners about, and we do talk to boaters about too, just in passing, are things that are applicable outside of marinas. So that same concept, having a vegetated buffer on the edge, before you reach the water. That is applicable homeowners. If you, instead of mowing all the way to your ditch in your backyard, if you put trees or any sort of plants to help buffer and soak up nutrients, that is a huge help to reducing nutrient runoff into our waterways. So we apply it at marinas, but it's a best practice that works for almost anywhere. So there's lots of best practices that are like that, and I enjoy kind of sharing that. We're like, well, you're doing this at the marina, but you can do it at home too, and it works just as well.
Great. If you're a marina owner out there, where would they go to get information about the program? Like, is there a website that's easy for them to access that has all the practices on there?
Sure. Yeah. So and I'm gonna make sure I get this right. It's Ohio Sea Grant. I know it's like you're writing Ohio Sea Grant. So Ohio SEAGRANT.osu.edu/clean. And that will get you to our current, we're actually updating our website now, so that'll get you to our old website, and that'll soon be a new website. There's also honestly, if you just Google, there's a Great Lakes Clean Marina Network that if anybody is listening from across the Great Lakes, and even if you're outside of Ohio, if you just Google Great Lakes Clean Marina Network, you can find all the other clean marina programs that are throughout the Great Lakes. And there's a Google map that's off of that website that you can find your nearest clean marina in the Great Lakes. So that's pretty cool. It's meant to be for boaters that especially do travel throughout the Great Lakes and they want to find your nearest clean marina, and you can find it on that map.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that makes it nice and easy because, yeah, I know I'm a very visual person, so to be able to see things on a map, it really helps you to be able to find those marinas really easily.
Yeah.
So I know, like, we've been talking about some pollution in the Great Lakes, and one of the things that was interesting that I had never heard of was copper pollution.
Yeah.
And so, can you tell us a little about that? Because I've never heard about that. So, like, I've heard all about the phosphorus and like the runoff from the salt. Like, eventually, we might end up with the Great Salt Lakes versus just the freshwater lakes. Years and
Yeah.
years down the road. But I've never heard of copper pollution. So, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, and this is a great example of where our role with Sea Grant is, again, to help have that balance. So copper and copper sulfate is can be I know colleagues that prescribe that, for example, for pond management. So it's actually a nutrient that can be used in the right amounts and the right doses to manage things such as algae or algal growth in ponds and in certain aquatic areas. So it's kind of one of those things, everything in moderation. What we do is there is actually copper-based anti-fouling paint that many boaters use to apply to the bottoms of their vessels. And this is not unique to the Great Lakes. It's worldwide. It's a commonly used type of ablative paint. The purpose of it is it actually helps with the invasive species. It actually is meant to prevent any fouling organisms from attaching to the bottom of your boat. From a boater's perspective, it's to help make the boat go faster and nice and smooth. But from an ecologist perspective, it actually can, if you don't have invasive species attaching to the bottom of the boat, if that boat gets trailered somewhere else, there's less chance that you're actually spreading invasive species to those new waterways. So it's something that is important, and we understand the need for it. But what our role is with Clean Marinas and Sea Grant and how we educate is to help. What happens is at the end of the season, the marinas and boaters will power wash the bottoms of their boats, and a lot of time that copper-based anti-fouling paint does come off and will go into the waterways. So what our role is okay, copper is certainly, again, used in small amounts to manage algae. What we're trying to reduce is large amounts of this copper-based anti-fouling paint running off and entering our waterways. So what we did is we, in the Great Lakes, wanted to understand, get a grasp on, how much copper runoff is occurring, and if it actually stays in the marina or if it actually goes and we find it further downstream, really kind of what the impact is. So we applied for funding through a grant called the Lake Erie Protection Fund that's actually funded by license plate sales in Ohio, so that's pretty cool. And we did research on during boat washing how much copper was actually running off. And so what we did find was we found there was a high concentration of copper that was in the runoff water from power washing the boats. But the good thing we found is it's staying, it's a heavy metal. So it basically runs off into the basin near where the boat bottom washing is occurring and settles out. And there's high concentrations in the sediment there, but it's very well contained. And the further you go out in the marina, the lower that concentration gets to where by the time you're out in the harbor, it's little to nothing. So again, this science is what we help to educate our marina owners on. We educate on, okay, if you can simply find a way to contain that water, you'll solve the problem. If we can capture that water or put in some filtration technology, even socks, things like that, we can significantly reduce the copper runoff that's occurring during boat bottom washing. So we've actually had some marinas put together just a simple catch basin where the water is directed to that They take a 55-gallon drum, cut it in half, and basically allow that to be a sand filter, let the solids, the heavy metals settle out. And during the boat bottom washing that just occurs in the fall, they do that. And it really reduces the runoff, the pollution there. So we're trying to find, again, more economically feasible, sustainable ways that they can still do what they do, but do it in a better, more environmentally friendly way. So that's just one example of kind of how we try and balance that.
That's really interesting, and I like how you're able to find a simple solution to hopefully be able to counteract that. Because, while you said it's not something that goes out into the harbor very much, there's still a lot of fish and other species that use those marina areas, and you want them to be able to be healthy and not
Yeah,
have those issues as well.
yeah.
Um, so. Um, I guess another question I have, because I need to make sure I get it in, and if anyone out there has any questions for Sarah, please definitely send them in when it comes to anything with the Ohio Sea Grant or the Clean Marinas program. But I made sure I promised someone who's a little pint-sized version of me, my niece. She had a question about reefs in the Great Lakes. Are there actually reefs in the Great Lakes? Because when we think of reefs, a lot of times, like we think of something like the Great Barrier Reef. So are there actual reefs in the Great Lakes?
Yeah, and I'm glad she brought that up. So I sent you a couple little links there, and I'm happy to follow up with anybody with questions afterwards. So there's a couple different types of reefs. Back in the 70s and 80s, Ohio Sea Grant partnered with lots of community organizations to actually develop what are called artificial reefs. So if you are from other coastal states, ocean states, there's artificial reefs down in the Gulf of Mexico from decommissioned oil rigs, things like that. So we set up artificial reefs in Lake Erie. And those have been very successful. There's some actually fact sheets. They did some economic valuation studies. I believe it's 3 times the cost of the actual reefs to develop the economic benefit was 3 times the value of the actual cost of creating these reefs. And the purpose of those reefs was to help create additional habitat for sport fish off of the Lake Erie shoreline. And so Sea Grant actually has kind of GPSed where those artificial reefs are. I know from talking to anglers over the years that they're very commonly known, sport fishing locations. So they're named for different groups that helps fundraise for them and partner to get those reefs in place. So yes, we have artificial reefs in Lake Erie. And then the other thing that's all throughout the Great Lakes, it's a pretty cool that not a lot of people know about, is we have shipwrecks, and we have a lot of them. There's actually over 1,700 shipwrecks that are in Lake Erie alone, lots more throughout the Great Lakes. We haven't found all those shipwrecks, but they're there. We found, I think, over 250. And there's lots of scuba diving groups that have helped to find those, and Sea Grant did some research back in the 80s and 90s to find those. But we actually have a shipwrecks and maritime tales brochure that we're working on updating that lists out all of the shipwrecks in Lake Erie, and those are really cool. There's some that are shallow enough that you can actually snorkel over. And again, it's like snorkeling in Lake Erie. Yes, you can snorkel, and we might not have tropical fish, but we'll have walleye and bass and lots of cool fish that you can still see. And it's just neat to see the shipwrecks. So there's several groups I know that are divers that regularly do trips on shipwrecks across Lake Erie. So yeah, short answer, yes.
Yeah, I think some people, like you said, we don't have those brightly colored tropical fish, but there are some Great Lakes fish that do get to be quite colorful sometimes. So you can see some really interesting and cool fish down there. And I know over in Lake Michigan, there's shipwrecks that you can see when you're up on the dunes. You can see them like straight down, that's how close to the shore they are, and you can go out there and dive. And like you said, you can go snorkeling. It might not be something that you want to do in January, but during the
Yeah.
summer months, you easily can go out there and go see everything and have a good time. There's a number of the grad students from my university that like to go out and scuba dive on the shipwrecks, in the Great Lakes. So it's definitely a fun pastime for people to do.
Yeah.
So I know we're starting to get towards the end of our time here. So if you have any last minute questions for Sarah, please send those in. If we don't get to them at all, definitely feel free to engage with us after the broadcast. So are there any like last minute things that I haven't asked that are you think would be of interest to everyone out there when it comes to Great Lakes and the clean marinas and the Ohio State program?
Sure. Yeah. Really, I guess the main thing to get across is if you're, I guess, a couple different things. If you're a scientist, if you're interested in going into the sciences, there's a whole realm of different careers to go into. So I guess for those people, if you're grad students, undergrads, or just starting your career, the advice I would give you is to explore. When I was growing up, I again just knew about the path of research and that path for science, and there's so many other things you can do with a science background. So definitely explore, reach out to people that are in different careers, find out what they do. There's never a dull day. I never know what I'm going to do. When I started, I was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to work on, and I just can't even tell you how much the field that I'm working in has broadened just in the past 5 years as I've been working with Sea Grants. So definitely reach out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out to people that are in your field that you're interested in. And then for the general public, I would say, I think, I don't know about in the coastal states, but in the Great Lakes, there's a lot going on. There are a lot of issues out there, but I encourage people to stay positive because in Lake Erie, the biggest thing that we think about is we have come such a long way. In the 60s, we were declared a dead lake, and some people look at the algae blooms that we have now and they say, oh, it's dead again. And the reality is we have come leaps and bounds from where we were in the 60s and 70s. And so we actually, back in the 60s and 70s, were charged with cutting our phosphorus in half in order to solve the harmful algal bloom problem. And we actually did that. And it was a combination of various partners and lots of people that worked to make that happen. The charge right now for solving the harmful algal bloom is a 40% reduction in our phosphorus. So the positive part is we've been here before. We did it before in the 80s and 90s, and for some of the best walleye fishing you ever had in Lake Erie. So I try and stay positive. It's easy to get caught up in kind of the negative things that are out there, but there's so much that every single person can do. And so I would just encourage you, feel free to reach out to Ohio Sea Grant with questions about any of the different scientific topics, and that's what we're there for. And just don't feel like if you're only one person. That's all anything does, is it's a bunch of lots of different people working together to solve a problem. So I just encourage people to stay positive on that.
Great. And for all the scientists out there, Sarah's going to be at IAGLR 2017 next week. So for anyone who's interested in Great Lakes science and wants to just stop on by Detroit next week, there's going to be a whole bunch of Great Lakes scientists there presenting their research on various aspects of the Great Lakes. So everything from fish to birds to water quality. There'll be folks showcasing how they fly their drones around now, so their unmanned aerial vehicles with research. There'll be a lot of great outreach stuff there. You'll learn how to do science communication. There's going to be a whole bunch there, and you can definitely look up Sarah there. So for all the Twitter folks out there who are on the interwebs, make sure you tune in and track down where Sarah is at IAGLR and follow up with any of your questions about Ohio Sea Grant things. So.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
So for everyone out there, I'd like to thank Sarah for sticking around and definitely through the technical issues that we had today. So it definitely is a lot better when the internet is working versus having no stream at all.
That's right.
So, but yes, thanks for sticking around, and hopefully we'll get to catch back up because I will be at IAGLR next week as well. So thank you for coming on the broadcast today.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
So for those of you who have more questions for Sarah afterwards, if you're watching this on the replay, definitely feel free to tweet her at her handle, which is Sarah A. Orlando. If you have any questions for me or for Scicomm Monday, feel free to tweet me at either Wildlife BioGal, which is my personal Twitter handle, or at the broadcast handle of Scicomm Monday. And a reminder for next week, as I said, we will be at iAgler 2017, so make sure you tune in for that. We'll be broadcasting live from Detroit, so none of this crazy remote broadcasting fun that we normally do. So we'll be there with Ariel Fournier, Katie O'Reilly, and then Jordan Rudder will all be live on the broadcast. We're trying to get a few more guests in for our normal broadcast time. And then we'll also be chatting with people live on Periscope throughout the week at iAgler. So tune in for all the rest of those. And then, as promised, I need to make sure that I send in a quick outreach shout out for Naruo Trees, who was the kind person who was my 2000th follower on my personal Twitter handle. I promised whoever was the 2000th person that they'd get a shout out on Scicomm. So there you go. Thanks for following, and I hope you're enjoying all the science that we try to put out on there. And so with that, I hope you guys, everyone has a great rest of your day. Go out, explore, do some science, have some fun, and hopefully we will see you on the next Scicomm Monday.